We have a really fun question today from Blind 5-year-old who asks, can you provide some insight into how Google uses Percolator, Dremel, and Prege? All right, so what are Percolator, Dremel, and Prege? These are completely different tools, and I'm doing the mental translation from internal code names to external code names, so I'll try to keep them straight. Percolator is basically a layer on top of Bigtable. Indexing in the old days used to be done in what we'd call batch mode. And so it's kind of like you wait for the next train, and the trains run every hour or every day or something like that. And so you have to wait, and then all the people get on the train and they all head out and they're good to go. Caffeine and Percolator, you can see the connection between a percolator and caffeine, takes that notion of batch indexing and moves it to incremental. So it's more like as passengers arrive, they can get in a taxi and they can leave immediately. So instead of waiting for 1,000 people to get ready to leave, once a day in the train, people can leave whenever they're ready by just getting in the taxi. So that's the notion of moving from batch indexing to an incremental index. So caffeine was the overall system that that's the external name for it. And Percolator is a part of that helps make sure that that whole system runs and runs well. Dremel is sort of like, okay, I'll use a metaphor here a little bit. You know how you might use a MySQL database and you say, select star from whatever, and it works for, pretty good sized databases. Dremel is a lot like MySQL, except for huge databases. So there's some architectural differences, but on a practical level, what Dremel lets people at Google do is take databases on the size of the web and do very fast queries over them. And so all sorts of people use them to do all sorts of analysis. Even the spam fighters use them. It's a fantastic tool. And there are papers about many of these projects, and then there are often open source implementations of some of these as well. But Dremel lets you do really great, fast data analysis, extraction over very large databases, and lets you play with them in basically an interactive mode. Prege is basically a system to deal with graph problems. So there was an interesting blog post in 2009 on the research blog post that basically said once you have all this graph stuff done as a library where you can or as a set of code and machines to implement them, they said that they could do PageRank in about 15 lines of code. So those are 15 very expensive lines of code, but you have to get the system right and architected well so that you can handle those kinds of graph problems. So you can imagine, we might have somebody new come in and want to come up with a better version of PageRank, or come up with a completely different way of trying to compute reputation over links, or any other type of graph problem. Maybe you've got some sort of connections between people or something like that. So you can imagine wanting to run that computation very fast, and Prege is a system that lets you do that. One of the fun things about being at Google is there is a lot of great infrastructure and a lot of great machinery to help you do really fast processing, experimentation, and then once you find something that's a good signal for search quality or some way to improve how we crawl the web or something like that, we're able to deploy that on top of our architecture much more quickly. I guess the downside is sometimes it's a little harder to take something and open source it because it's got vast chunks of Google proprietary stuff, but you really do get to stand on the shoulders of giants and save yourself a lot of time and work by not having to implement everything yourself. There's a lot of great machinery here at Google that lets us do that instead. So thanks for the question. It's an interesting one, and hope that helps.